Save us, Lord. Save us. You might not have known that that's what you were saying outside when you were making your shouts of Hosanna, but that's what we were saying. It's what the people were shouting the day that Jesus entered into Jerusalem in that last week of his life. Save us, Lord. Hoshiachnu. Hosanna. Save us. The palm branches that were strewn about, the garments as well, were all ways of saying the same thing. You are the one who has come to save us. So get on with it and start saving us. Hosanna. God made a covenant, they might have said, with our ancestors, with Abraham, to inhabit this land. Made now impure by hundreds of years of Gentile imperial occupation. Hosanna. Put an end to their presence in our temple courts and on our streets. Hosanna. And Hosanna with might and with furious anger. God made a covenant with our ancestor David that one of his descendants would always sit on this throne and have geopolitical rule in this land. But a puppet king sits on that throne now instead. And a Roman prefect is actually in charge. Hosanna. Son of David, Hosanna. Put an end to their presence on the throne and in the governor's quarters. Hosanna, and with power and with vengeance. Hosanna. Hosanna, save us, Lord, and Hosanna quickly. But you better Hosanna the way that we want you to Hosanna. You better Hosanna the way we expect you to Hosanna. We've been waiting a long time. Today, our service will preach more than anything I could say possibly would about how the words Hosanna come with their expectations, and how sometimes the same lips that say Hosanna will also say crucify him. The emotional tension in the room, the contrast in moods as we work our way through the service, they're instructive. The frenetic energy of the day, though not shared by Brownie the donkey, who, by the way, just to let her off the hook a little bit, is pregnant, and she needed a snack, so she stopped for a snack. And it let us catch up a little bit, and that's good. But the frenetic energy otherwise in the day speaks to the meaning of the day and the prayers of the day as well. They all point us right to the heart of the matter. That Jesus came to save us, but maybe not how we expected. That Jesus came to fulfill our request and God's will. More importantly, God's will to save us and all of creation, to redeem us. Just wouldn't come the way that we were asking for it. But it did come. Lo, your king does indeed come to you, humble and gentle. You might have been asking for power and vengeance. You're receiving salvation with humility and gentleness, but salvation nevertheless ready to change your heart in this new covenant. But that could not be done without sacrifice. We began weeks ago talking about covenants in a way that I think is a good way to reframe as we enter into these last few discussions of covenant in this Holy Week that we're in. We talked about them as the primary language that the Bible uses to describe the invitation humanity has been offered to partner with God. We described them as a currency of sorts that provides an exchange, an invitation to define the most important relationships in our lives with God and with one another. Even when they look like contracts, they're mostly about how two parties will figure things out together, demonstrated by the idea that God established a covenant and it didn't work out, and so God started a new one. And it didn't work out, so God started a new one, and so on and so forth, and on it went through 39 books of the Old Testament. like marriages that last, or friendships that last, or collegiality that is bearing fruit. The parties involved in these covenants are guaranteed to have troubles. But the commitment to sacrifice for the sake of love is what will drive the adaptation needed in the story to allow all good things to come to fruition, to see it through. Anybody who has loved a child or a partner would tell you the same. And they would also tell you that love requires sacrifice. To love is to sacrifice. To set yourself aside every now and then and choose the other, sometimes frequently. To turn toward instead of away. Even when, or especially when, turning toward the other is what is most painful. To choose the other, even when you know you're making a choice and you kind of do so begrudgingly. To love is to sacrifice, and God loved the world in that way. The Apostle Paul says it all the time, I'll paraphrase, but that when we were in the midst of our sin, when we were dead in our trespasses, when we had violated all of the covenants, God still loved us and sent us his Son. We're probably more familiar with the way the Gospel of John talks about it. For God so loved the world. Maybe better translated, God loved the world in this way. That to fulfill hope for salvation, redemption from sin and from death, God would fulfill both sides of every covenant God had ever established. That's God's adaptive work in making the covenants come to fruition. God would fulfill both sides of every covenant, and it would be situated, God's redeeming work, in one faithful covenant partner, Jesus of Nazareth. And where or when that would require sacrifice, that sacrifice would be made by that one faithful covenant partner, sharing in both sides of the bargain, a representative of humanity and of God, both priest and victim, of a sacrificial offering for life and for love, a demonstration of God's own love. For Jesus, that sacrifice surely is depicted most fully in the cross. And that's the scene that we will turn to as we begin to tell ourselves again the story of his crucifixion here in just a moment. But if we even were to narrow it down further, we might say that it is perhaps best known or understood in that one moment in the garden, when clearly Jesus makes the intentional, willful choice to love, to turn toward pain and death for the sake of love, because that is what most fully aligns with God's will. That is what most fully aligns with God's covenant loyalty. That's what most fully aligns with the steadfastness of God's love. We, who shouted just moments ago, Hosanna, Lord, save us, perhaps with our own sense of expectation, or perhaps with our own readiness in one form or another to also say, crucify him. We who have shouted Hosanna, now let us listen carefully to the way our request has been fulfilled through the love of Christ, who through these mighty acts has truly offered salvation to all.